It's the middle of the night, and something wakes you. Not a sound exactly, just a change in the room. The air feels different, and before you've even opened your eyes properly, your arms have gone strange. The skin tightens, tiny bumps rise across your shoulders, the hair on the back of your neck lifts, and for 1 second, you're completely certain you're not alone. Nothing is there. You check twice, the way anyone would at that hour, half hoping to find something so the feeling makes sense. The room is empty, the door is shut, and you tell yourself you imagined it. But your body didn't imagine anything. Your body ran a full alarm sequence, start to finish, in less time than it took you to sit up. It didn't ask you first. It didn't wait for proof. Here's the part that should bother you. That alarm was built for an animal covered in thick fur. You aren't. So what exactly did your skin think it was doing? You get goosebumps a few times a week, maybe when a song hits, maybe stepping out into a cold morning, maybe when someone tells a story that lands a little too close. You've never once thought about it. It's just something skin does. But it isn't just something skin does. Goosebumps are the visible edge of one of the oldest survival systems still running inside a human being. Every time they appear, your body is executing a set of instructions written for a creature that stopped existing a very long time ago. And the strangest thing scientists found isn't that the system still works. It's what it's actually doing while you think it's doing nothing. Because for most of the last century, the answer seemed obvious. Goosebumps were dead weight, a leftover, a fossil in your skin with no job left to do. Then, a team looked closer at the tiny muscle behind every single one of them and realized the whole story had been backwards. Run your fingers along your forearm. Under the surface, at the base of every hair you own, there's a muscle so small you could never see it. Its only job in life is to make that one hair stand up. You have millions of them. Each one sits at an angle, hooked to the root of a hair at one end and to the underside of your skin at the other. When it pulls, the hair tips upright and the skin gets tugged down around it. That's the bump. Every goosebump on your arm is the shadow of a tiny muscle pulling. Now here's what makes this system different from almost everything else in your body. You can't fire it. Try right now. Clench your jaw, focus, order your arm to raise its hair. Nothing happens. A rare few people can do it on command, and even they can't really explain how. That's because those muscles don't take orders from you. They're wired into the emergency system, the one that floods you with adrenaline, opens your pupils wide, and slams your heart into a sprint before you've even worked out what's wrong. Goosebumps run on the same line as panic. That's why they arrive first. Your skin gets the memo before you do. And whatever that memo says, it was clearly written for a body you don't have anymore. There's a map to it too, and you already know it without ever being taught. The bumps rise on your forearms, your shoulders, the back of your neck, sometimes down your thighs. They never rise on your palms. They never rise on the soles of your feet or on your lips. Look at where nothing happens, and you're looking at the only skin on your body that grows no hair at all. No hair, no little muscle, nothing there to pull. So the pattern of a goosebump is really a map of where your fur used to be thickest. Your body is showing you the outline of a coat you have never seen. And it's fast. The whole thing goes off in under a second, quicker than you can turn your head toward a noise, then fades just as quickly once the danger passes. Your body doesn't waste a moment on it, and it doesn't hold it a second longer than it has to. That's a lot of care for something everyone assumed was broken junk. And it gets harder to dismiss once you see what the exact same equipment does in an animal that still has its coat. Watch a cat meet a dog in an alley. In a fraction of a second, the cat doubles. The fur lifts along the spine. The tail thickens into a brush. The whole animal seems to inflate. Nothing about the cat changed except the angle of its hair. That's the same muscle, same nerve, same instruction. It's a bluff, and it's a good one. In the wild, size decides most fights before they start. A predator sizing up a meal is doing quick maths on risk, and an animal that suddenly looks bigger and harder to kill can end a confrontation without a scratch. Birds do it. Rats do it. Chimpanzees do it when they're threatened. And a chimp with its hair on end is genuinely alarming to look at. You can read it instantly too. A dog goes stiff and the ridge along its back rises, and you don't need anyone to explain what that means. You back off. That's how loud the signal is when there's a coat to carry it. Now picture yourself doing it. A stranger follows you down an empty street. Your body triggers the ancient bluff, and what happens? Your arms get slightly rough. That's it. Nobody has ever been scared off by texture. The bluff needs fur to work. The bluff needs a coat thick enough that lifting it changes your outline. Without hair, the entire display collapses into a skin effect that no one else can even see in the dark. Your ancestors did find a replacement, and it wasn't on their bodies. A person alone couldn't look bigger, so people stopped being alone. They stood in groups, made noise, raised burning branches, threw stones from a distance no animal could close safely. The threat display moved off the skin and into the hands, and it worked far better than fur ever had. But nobody told the muscles. The old display kept firing under the new one, silent and invisible, every time fear hit. You can be standing in a lit kitchen holding your phone and still run the exact same routine a cornered animal runs. There is one place on you where the old display still almost works, and it's the place the language never stopped pointing at. Nobody says their forearm hair stood on end. They say the hair on the back of their neck did, or that their hair stood up, because your head and neck still carry enough hair for you to feel the pull moving up as a wave. It's the last patch of the original coat left with enough hair on it for the movement to register at all. Watch someone in real fear and you can sometimes see it. The scalp tightens, the neck hair lifts, and for a fraction of a second, a human being does a very small version of what a wolf does. Then the wave passes, and the only person in the world who knew it happened is the one it happened to, standing very still, waiting to find out whether the fear was worth it. Which makes the obvious conclusion look even more obvious. You're carrying old equipment from an older animal, still switching itself on inside a body that has no use for it. Except that's the conclusion scientists held for decades. And it turned out to be wrong, for a reason nobody expected. Before we get to that, there's a second job Goosebumps do, and it's the one that actually keeps animals alive. Cold air moves. That's what makes it dangerous. If air can flow across a body, it strips heat away continuously. And a body that keeps losing heat eventually stops working. But if you trap a layer of air and hold it still, that trapped air becomes insulation. It's exactly how a winter jacket functions. The jacket isn't warm. The air inside it is. A furred animal does this instantly. Cold hits, the muscles fire, the hair stands up, and the coat puffs into a thicker layer that holds still air against the skin. A bird in freezing weather looks like a feathered ball for the same reason. It's not fat, it's insulation, switched on in seconds. You have the same reflex. Step outside on a cold morning and your skin does exactly what a wolf's skin does. The muscles pull, the hairs lift, and your body tries to fluff a coat. The coat isn't there. It hasn't been there for longer than anyone alive can properly imagine. And the warmth you get out of it is close to nothing. A faint prickle over bare skin, no trapped air, no shield against anything. Your emergency heating system is a hand reaching for a blanket that was thrown out 1,000,000 years ago. You can even watch the response argue with itself. Someone who swims in freezing water week after week stops reacting the way they did at the start. The first plunge is violent, all gasping and crawling skin. Months later, the same water produces far less of it because the body learns that this particular cold isn't going to kill it and stops sounding a full alarm. The circuit is capable of being talked down. It just needs the evidence, and it needs it over and over. And there's a version of this that has nothing to do with the weather. Think about the last time you were properly ill. You're lying under blankets in a warm room, and you're freezing. The skin crawls, the bumps rise, your teeth start going. Nothing about the room changed. What changed is what your body decided warm means. Fighting off an illness, it turns its own dial up, and suddenly your normal temperature feels dangerously cold. So everything switches on at once. You shiver, your hands go cold and pale, and those same little muscles start hauling at hair that isn't there. That's why fever chills feel so much worse than winter. You're not cold. You're being told you are by a system that cannot be argued with. Same muscles, same order, a completely different lie. Which raises the question that turns this whole thing from a biology fact into something genuinely unsettling. If the fur is gone, and the bluff can't work, and the warmth doesn't come, why is the machinery still there? Bodies are ruthless about waste. Cave animals lose their eyes. Flightless birds lose their wings. Useless equipment gets stripped out fast because building and maintaining it costs energy that could go to staying alive. And this isn't a small piece of leftover equipment. It's millions of muscles spread across nearly every inch of you, kept in working order and wired into your fear response for 1,000,000 years and counting. Something that useless should have faded out long ago. So why did your ancestors give up an entire coat of fur and keep every last one of the muscles that used to move it? To understand that, you need to know what happened to the fur. And skin doesn't survive in the ground, so nobody can simply dig it up and check. The proof had to come from stranger places. One of them is lice. There's a kind that lives in hair and a kind that lives in clothing, and the second kind can only exist once somebody is wearing something. Trace back to the moment those two split apart and you land deep in prehistory, long before farming, long before cities, long before anyone wrote anything down. People were already covering up, which means the fur was already gone. Then there's sweat. You leak water through your skin better than almost any animal alive, and that only works if the water can reach the air. Under a coat, it's useless. On bare skin, it's the best cooling system on the planet. Everything points the same way. The fur went, and it went a very long time ago. Your ancestors spent an enormous stretch of time as the strangest large mammal on the landscape. Bare, exposed, every other animal out there wearing a coat. And they did it for a reason. Hunting in open heat is brutal on a furred body, because a coat that saves you at night will cook you at noon. Sweating through bare skin is one of the best cooling systems in the animal world, and it let early humans keep moving in temperatures that forced predators into the shade. That's the trade. You gave up the night to own the afternoon. But every trade has a cost, and this one arrived after sunset. Naked skin loses heat fast. The same body that could outlast an antelope in the sun could die of exposure by morning. Fire, shelter, and animal skins weren't luxuries. They were the only reason the trade didn't kill the species. Losing the coat changed something else, too. Bare skin turned into a screen. Blood rushing to the face became visible as a flush. Blood draining away became visible as pallor. And other people learned to read both instantly. Fur hides all of that. Skin broadcasts it. So it's a strange twist that the one signal your skin still sends constantly is the one nobody can read. A person across the fire could see you go red, could see you go white, and would never once know that your arms had gone tight with fear. The oldest message your body sends is the only private one you have. Picture it properly. You're on open ground as the light goes, a long way from anyone, carrying meat that smells for a mile. The grass moves on your left in a way the wind can't explain, and your neck goes cold before you've decided anything. You don't reason. You turn, you back away, you get to the fire. Maybe there was nothing there. Maybe there was. Either way, you got home. And that's the entire reason the reflex exists in you now, thousands of generations later, in a room with a locked door. So here's a body that walked away from fur on purpose, that solved the cold with fire and hide instead of biology, and that still refuses to switch off the muscles that used to raise its hair. That refusal is the mystery. And when a team finally worked out why, the answer had nothing to do with warmth or bluffing at all. If you're the kind of person who wants the forgotten truths hiding inside your own body, subscribe now, because what comes next completely changed what scientists thought goosebumps were for. For years, nobody bothered looking closely at that little muscle, because why study junk? Then a team finally did, and found something that had no business being there. The muscle wasn't alone. A nerve came down and wrapped around it, and it didn't just pass by on the way somewhere else. It stopped there, and sitting right underneath both of them were the cells that grow new hair. 3 things locked together into one piece of machinery in a system that supposedly stopped mattering long ago. Then they worked out what it actually does, and the whole picture flipped. Cold hits your skin, and that nerve fires. The first thing that happens is the muscle pulling, which lifts the hair and gives you the goosebump you can see. But the nerve doesn't stop there. It keeps signaling down to the cells underneath and wakes them up, and they start growing new hair. So the system has 2 speeds. Right now, raise what hair you have. Over the coming weeks, grow more of it. Goosebumps aren't a failed attempt at warmth. They're the visible flash of a command that says, it's cold here, and this body needs a thicker coat. One half of the order happens in a second. The other half plays out across months. The muscle isn't a leftover at all. It's the anchor the whole thing is built around, and it's part of how an animal rebuilds its own skin before winter arrives. Take it away, and the rest of the system falls apart. So the machine in your arm was never broken. It's been running the same complete survival plan this whole time, faithfully, inside a body that can't grow the coat it keeps calling for. You're watching the first step of a process that can no longer finish. Look at any furred mammal through autumn, and you can see the ending you're missing. A dog thickens, a deer changes coat, a horse left outside grows a rough winter layer that nobody asked it to grow. None of those animals decided anything. Cold touched the skin, the signal ran, and months later there was more hair than before. Yours stops at the first frame. The alarm sounds, the muscles pull, the cells underneath start to stir, and then the whole thing runs out of road because there's no coat left to build. Every cold morning of your life, your skin has started a project it cannot complete. And the reflex doesn't need to be learned. A newborn does it in the first minutes of life, before it has any idea what cold is, before it has ever been frightened by anything. Nobody teaches you goosebumps. They arrive fully installed, wired straight into the oldest emergency circuit you own, and they'll still be working on the last day you're alive. That discovery hit harder than anyone expected, because it means the goosebump is a way into how hair growth gets switched on and off at all. A thing nobody took seriously turned out to be sitting on the controls. If you ever wondered why a bit of dead-end trivia about cold skin ended up mattering, that's why. And if that were the end of it, Goosebumps would just be a sad piece of biological loyalty. But it isn't the end, because the system does something else that nobody has fully explained, and it happens to you constantly. A song reaches the part where everything drops away, and your arm prickles. Someone tells you their grandmother said a name out loud on the night she died, and it moves up the back of your neck. A crowd goes silent before something enormous, and it hits you across the shoulders. There's no predator, there's no cold. Your skin is at a perfectly comfortable temperature, and the muscles fire anyway. It happens through touch, too. Someone runs a hand lightly down your arm or speaks close enough to your ear that you feel the air, and the skin answers before you've decided how you feel about it. A whisper can do it from across a room. That reaction is completely useless as defense and completely useless as heat, and it still fires harder than most cold ever will. And it isn't just a feeling you're imagining. In that moment, your brain floods with the same chemistry it hands out for food, for touch, for anything it wants you to come back and do again. A A song can hit that switch as hard as almost anything else in your life. Play a song that once wrecked you enough times and the chill stops coming, then turns up again years later when you've half forgotten it. Whatever this circuit is tracking, it isn't the melody. It's surprise. The moment your body can predict what happens next, the skin goes quiet, which is a strange thing for a temperature response to care about. Now sit with the weirdness of that. A defense circuit built to handle predators and freezing nights has somehow ended up wired to melody, to awe, to a voice cracking at the right moment in a story. Why would an alarm system respond to beauty? The strongest ideas point somewhere uncomfortable. Chills often come at moments of unexpected connection or unexpected separation. A voice calling out, a crowd moving as one, the particular ache of something ending. In a social animal, being alone was not a mood. It was a death sentence. And the body treated the loss of the group the way it treated the loss of warmth, because they used to be the same emergency. There's a reason the language survives. You say a moment gave you chills. You say your blood ran cold. You say someone left you out in the cold. Every one of those phrases quietly ties emotional isolation to temperature. And your skin was making that connection long before any language existed to describe it. There's a harsher proof that this runs on the emergency line rather than on temperature, and it's hiding in an expression you've used your whole life. When someone quits a drug abruptly, one of the things that happens is a flood of the stress chemistry the body had learned to suppress. It hits the skin the same way terror does, pale, clammy, covered in risen bumps. People looked at that skin, decided it resembled a plucked bird, and the phrase cold turkey stuck. That's how tightly this circuit is bolted to fear and shock. It shows up in withdrawal, in panic, in the second after a near miss on a road. Adrenaline goes out and the hair goes up, in a body with barely any hair to raise. And not everyone gets them. Some people get chills from music constantly, some almost never. And the difference seems to track with how strongly a person's imagination and emotional wiring connect to sound. Your goosebumps are, in a small way, a readout of how deeply you feel things. It shows up at endings, too. Standing at a graveside while someone says a name out loud. The last hug at an airport. A door closing on a house you're never going back to. No danger, no cold, and your arms go tight anyway. As if some old part of you understood loss long before you had a word for it. But that still leaves the darkest version of the question, because the chill that arrives in an empty house at 3 a.m. isn't about music, and it doesn't wait for you to work out what's wrong. Think back to that moment in the dark, before you understood anything. The skin reacted first. The explanation came after. And your body keeps records. A smell you haven't met in 15 years. A stretch of road. A particular tone in someone's voice. And the bumps rise before you've placed why. The memory hasn't loaded yet. The warning has. Somewhere in you, there's a file marked dangerous, and the skin reads it faster than you can open it. That order is not an accident. Danger takes a shortcut. It reaches the alarm long before it reaches the part of you that names things, because the part that names things is slow, and slow gets you killed. The shortcut doesn't care whether it's right. It cares about being early. So your body runs a rule that sounds insane until you understand the stakes. If in doubt, assume it's a predator. React now, apologize later. The cost of a false alarm is a few seconds of embarrassment. The cost of a missed alarm is everything. That's the real reason goosebumps feel supernatural. They show up unattached to any explanation you can see, in a room where nothing is happening. And human beings are meaning-making creatures who cannot leave a signal like that alone. The sensation arrives with no cause, so we supply one. A presence, a spirit, someone walking over your grave. The phrase exists in a dozen languages. The skin gives the signal. The mind writes the story. And the story is always about something you can't quite see. But the trigger is usually a shift in air, a sound below hearing, a shape at the edge of vision, or a memory your brain flagged as dangerous before it told you why. Some of those triggers sit under the level you can notice. A hum too deep to hear, from wind moving through a big empty space or a machine running somewhere out of sight, can be felt in your chest without ever reaching your ears as sound. Rooms like that have a reputation. People walk in, go quiet, feel watched, and swear something is there with them. The alarm isn't broken in those rooms. It's picking up something real and telling you the only way it knows how. The entertainment industry worked this out and never let go of it. The reason a horror film drops the score to almost nothing before a scare is that silence forces you to listen harder. And a body listening that hard is already halfway into the alarm. The low drone under a trailer, the held breath before a door opens, the sudden air of an empty corridor. All of it is aimed straight at the same circuit, and all of it lands on your arms. You still obey it, whether or not you admit it. Walking home late, you cross to the other side of the street before you've decided why. You take the stairs instead of the empty lift. Something in you made the call, and you went along with it. Your ancestors survived by trusting that signal without arguing with it. The ones who stopped to reason it out in the dark are not part of your family tree. The uncomfortable part is that the circuit can't tell the difference. It fires at a shape in the trees, and it fires at a screen in a dark living room with the same conviction, because it was built in a world where every false alarm was survivable, and one missed alarm was not. Nobody has to teach a child to be unnerved by an empty hallway, and nobody has ever managed to train it out of an adult either. Which brings us back to where this started, and to the answer. There's one more thing to settle before the answer, and it's the question underneath all of this. Why keep any of it? Nature isn't sentimental, but it isn't tidy either. It doesn't throw things away for being pointless. It throws them away for being expensive. A fish in a pitch-black cave loses its eyes because eyes are costly to build and easy to damage. And down there, they earn nothing back. A mussel the size of a speck of dust, pulling for 1 second at a time, costs you almost nothing. So the fur went because heat was killing your ancestors, and a coat had a real price. The mussels stayed because they didn't. And then they turned out to be load-bearing for something else entirely, which sealed it. Nothing about that is an accident, and nothing about it is a leftover. Goosebumps are not a relic. That was the mistake. They're the surviving half of a system that still works, still fires at the right moments, still runs at full strength in a body that changed underneath it. The signal still goes out. The muscle still pulls. The cells underneath still wake up and start building a thicker coat for a winter your skin is certain is coming. Everything about the order is correct. The only thing missing is the fur. That's the answer to the question you clicked on. You still get goosebumps because the system was never about the hair you can see. It's about an order that travels from a nerve, through a muscle, down to the cells that decide how thick a coat should be. Take the fur out of that line, and every other link keeps doing its job perfectly. That's what you're feeling when your arm prickles at a song, or when your neck tightens in an empty room. You're not feeling a useless twitch. You're feeling a coat that isn't there being raised by a body that hasn't accepted it's gone. A million years of fire and shelter and clothing, and your skin is still trying to solve the cold the old way, on its own, every single time. It's the same feeling every time, too. Not a memory of fear, but the real thing, arriving fresh, in a body that has central heating and a locked door, and nothing in the room but you. There's something almost stubborn about it. Your species walked away from fur, built everything it has on that decision, and kept the reflex anyway. Because natural selection only deletes what actively costs you. This one costs nothing, so it stayed, and it will keep going. It ran in someone crossing open ground before there were words for what they were afraid of, and in someone lying awake beside a dying fire listening to the dark. The same muscles, the same second, same old fear. You live in a world that fires that alarm constantly and never once means predator. A message that arrives at the wrong hour, a sound in a house you thought was empty, a scene in a film designed by people who know exactly which circuit they're aiming at. The signal still goes out, still perfect, still a fraction of a second ahead of your thinking. And it may be the last honest proof you have that you are an animal. You can talk yourself out of almost anything else. You cannot talk your arms out of this. The next time your skin lifts for no reason you can name, don't dismiss it. That's the oldest part of you still standing watch, sounding an alarm it has never once been told to stop sounding. So the bumps on your arm aren't a scar left by evolution. They're a signal being sent right now, on time, by the oldest working part of you, to a coat that stopped answering somewhere around 1,000,000 years ago. It has never once been told the coat is gone, and after 1,000,000 years of trying, it still hasn't worked it out on its own. You lost the fur. Your body never got the message.